Democrats are just out of touch with the rest of the American people. They are out of touch. There's a reason that Joe Biden is riding at 38, 39, 40% in the approval ratings. Nancy Pelosi, by the way, is out there suggesting that Joe Biden is a great president. But she's been disconnected from reality ever since she let the gelato get to her brain where it conflicted with the Botox in her face.
Joe Biden is a great president. He is a gift. As I've said to him, don't say I told you this, but what I've said to him sometimes, I'm glad you didn't win before because we really needed you to win now for president. He's perfect.
He's perfect, guys. He is perfect, Joe Biden. I mean, if by perfect you mean immobile and not alive, so he's perfect in memory, okay? But here's the thing. She's out of touch. The Democrats are out of touch. Mainstream Democrats are out of touch. And that's not me saying that. That is Thomas Edsall saying that. So Thomas Edsall he writes a weekly column for the New York Times. It's always kind of interesting. He's on the left. But his columns are about the data. And here's what he says. Quote, as the 2022 midterms draw into view, the question arises, to what degree are democratic difficulties inevitable? Roy Teixeira, a co-editor of The Liberal Patriot, argues in an email that the cultural left has managed to associate the Democratic Party with a series of views on crime, immigration, policing, free speech, and of course race and gender that are quite far from those of the median voter. That is a success for the cultural left. The hard reality is that it's an electoral liability for the Democratic Party. Teixeira says, quote, the current Democratic brand suffers from multiple deficiencies that make it somewhere between uncompelling and toxic to wide swaths of American voters who might potentially be their allies. In Teixeira's view, many Democrats have fallen victim to what he calls the Fox News fallacy. This is the idea that if Fox News criticizes the Democrats for X, there must be absolutely nothing to X, and the job of Democrats is to assert that loudly and often. Take the issue of crime, initially dismissed as simply an artifact of the COVID shutdown that was being vastly exaggerated by Fox News and the like for their nefarious purposes. It is now apparent the spike in violent crime is quite real and that voters are very, very concerned about it. In an analysis of the complexity of current Democratic predicament, Sarah Anzia, professor of public policy and political science at Berkeley, addressed the preponderance of urban voters in the Democratic coalition. The Democrats have a challenge rooted in political geography and the institution of single-member, first-past-the-post elections. Anzia argues the density of Democratic voters in cities has geographically isolated the party and empowered its most progressive activist wing. She says that Democrats have, quote, collectively staked out positions that have alienated certain supporters, which is related to the built-in challenge I just described. In other words, they've created an echo chamber in the major cities, heavily minority-based, but also heavily elite, media, college-educated, liberal white voter-based. And that is completely out of touch with the rest of America. Anzia says the murder of George Floyd and BLM brought policing reform to the agenda in a way that hadn't been before. However, one defines the specifics of what that should mean. I do think it sounds extreme and scary to a lot of people when they say defund the police. This happens to be the case not just with regard to crime, but also with regard to things like gender. Eric Schickler, political science at Berkeley, described the most likely outcome of the 2022 elections as part of a cycle of disappointment and recrimination that not only has plagued Biden's first 2 years in office, but also dogged his two most recent Democratic predecessors, Bill Clinton in '94 and Barack Obama in 2010. The pattern: Republicans provided unified opposition to Democrats' agenda. Democrats struggled to corral all of their members behind their program. The party's own voters grew frustrated by the disappointing results compared to expectations. But that's really not the issue. The real issue is that they are out of touch. They're out of touch with their own constituency. Isabel Sawhill, senior fellow at Brookings, said, quote, the white working class that used to vote Democratic no longer does. She says when she studied this group back in 2018, what surprised me most was their very negative attitude towards government, their dislike of social welfare programs, their commitment to an ethic of personal responsibility, and the importance of family and religion in their lives. This large group includes some people who are just plain prejudiced, but a larger group that simply resents all the attention paid to race, gender, sexual preference, or identity, and the disrespect they think this entails for those with more traditional views and lifestyles. Sawhill says that these messages coming from progressive members of the Democratic Party will, quote, be exploited by Republicans to move moderate Democrats or move no Trump Republicans in their direction. Correct. But they can't stop. So this is why it matters when Ketanji Brown Jackson says she doesn't know what a woman is. But the idea that you guys are just going to keep doubling down on your radicalism is not going to alleviate the worries of people who are in the middle. It is foolish to continue to mirror the echo chamber politics of your own people. But this is precisely what the media do. See, there's a great irony here. The media are capable of drawing extraordinary attention on just non-issues. They're capable of falsifying they're capable of shutting down major stories. They are also capable of blinding the Democratic Party to such a point that they fall completely out of touch with their own voting base. When you create an echo chamber, the good news for you, if you're the Democratic Party, is in that echo chamber, there are lots and lots of people. And those people tend to believe what you say. The bad news is that if you are also in the echo chamber, you have no idea. There's an entire group of people outside the echo chamber who are not listening to what you say and think that what you're saying is just crazy. And more, this is the Democratic Party. This is why you see, for example, Gavin Newsom's wife celebrating Women's History Month by celebrating a dude, a trans man, or trans woman, a biological man, and also Angela Davis, a communist, right? I mean, here we go. There's 5 Golden State Trailblazers to celebrate this Women's History Month. Dolores Huerta is a labor leader. Angela Davis, who actively was involved in terrorism in the 70s. Del Martin and Phyllis Leon. Isa Noyola, who is, in fact, a dude. Joan Didion, who was kind of a conservative, actually. But, if this is your listicle of women to celebrate during Women's History Month, and it includes a biological man, I'm going to say that you are out of touch with the vast majority of the American people. But this is what the media do. This is what they do. They have created, I have an example of just how out of touch the media is, and it's kind of from a bizarre place. So, number one, never go to the New York Times advice columnist for advice. And there's a piece by the ethicist, who's not an ethicist, because there's nothing ethical about this person. Kwame Anthony Appiah, writing for the New York Times. And here is the question. This is actually, there are 2 separate questions in this advice mailbag, and both of them have, I would say, less than stellar answers. One is about a daughter who is like 15 years old and is sleeping with her female best friend in the house. Should I tell the parents? So things are going great. Here is the one, however, that I want to focus in on, okay? Here's the question, quote, I am an anesthesiologist at a busy multi-surgeon plastic surgery practice. One of the surgeons has started offering a tongue bifurcation procedure, wherein the tongue is split down the middle, creating a lizard-like appearance for patients who are interested in body modification. I find I have a deep aversion to this surgery to the point where I would like to refuse to take part. However, this means one of my partners would be stuck with the work, or worse, that a procedure might need to be canceled and rescheduled to the inconvenience of patient and surgeon. I also recognize I willingly take part in other body modifications like breast implants, rhinoplasty, and gender-affirming surgery. Is it reasonable for me to draw a line? Name withheld. Okay, so first of all, we might ask this particular doctor, whatever happened to the Hippocratic Oath and do no harm? It turns out that gender reassignment surgery doesn't actually reassign gender, or gender affirmation surgery, which is the most Orwellian phrase in the English language. You are not affirming anything. You are literally saying that your biological sex is wrong, and what you have in your head about your biological sex is somehow right, though completely unverifiable. You're not affirming anything. You are mutilating somebody. Okay, bottom line here is that this person has now gotten rid of any available standard. The Hippocratic Oath was do no harm. It turns out that chopping off somebody's dick would be doing some harm to them, probably. That is not the case with, for example, a rhinoplasty, which is not particularly doing harm. When it comes to breast implant surgery, it depends on the breast implant surgery. Generally, it's not doing harm. When it comes to splitting someone's tongue down the middle for no reason, this would also be a violation of do no harm. But because we are a completely libertarian-oriented, consent-based society, this person has to ask the question. And here's the New York Times advice columnist, quote, people who seek this lizard-like look are doing something to their bodies that, in most states, they are free to do. No third parties are being harmed. So ask yourself what basis you have for not participating in their surgery. If your revulsion derives from an aesthetic disagreement, does that mean you think all the other surgeries you engage in result in aesthetic improvements? Is it any of your business if clients choose to make themselves less attractive to you? The most obvious reason not to participate in this procedure would be an undue risk of complications. The American Dental Association advises against tongue splitting, deeming it an invasive procedure with negative health sequelae, including severe bleeding, infection, and nerve damage that outweigh any potential benefit. It's unclear how the association calculates the benefits. People who split tongues aren't trying to appeal to you or me. They're presumably trying to look cool or otherwise attractive to members of a particular subculture. Buttock augmentation may appeal to a wider set, but it too can involve various risks: infection, capsular contracture, sciatic neuropathy, fat embolism. And if you generally objected to surgery performed without a medical objective, you would surely have a range of other procedures in your sights too. Is there a principal distinction to be drawn here? Possibly. You'd have to have reliable data about the rates of serious complications. Well, you guys don't care about the rates of serious complications when it comes to gender reassignment surgery. You don't care at all, at all, at all, at all. It turns out that the chances of adverse consequences really are substantially higher for this procedure than for the others your practice offers. You would have a solid first do no harm argument. not only for refraining, but also from discouraging your colleagues from continuing to offer the service. But if you find yourself making this case, be sure it's more than a yuck response masquerading as a safety concern. You don't want to be speaking with forked tongue. How dare you judge people who want to chop their tongues down the middle? How dare you? And this is the media that is determining Democratic priorities these days. Very, very solid stuff here. And the same media, which, by the way, is upholding politicians as geniuses like AOC. Good piece by Kat Rosenfield today over at Unheard, talking about how AOC is completely useless in terms of legislation. She says Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez takes up space on magazine covers, cable news, social media, where her followers number in the millions across multiple platforms. Her Twitter account alone, with 12 million followers, is not just an order of magnitude larger than most junior politicians, but over twice as large as the followings of the other 3 members of her squad combined. Her influence is inestimable. She is a giant in the eyes of her fans and an enormous rent-free presence in the heads of the people who hate her. This, of course, is part of her cachet. Take up space has become a feminist war cry, a clapback at the offensive old mores that say women should be small and slender and quiet. It is to this war cry, presumably, that Take Up Space, the unprecedented AOC, refers. This is a brand new book out from New York Magazine about AOC called Take Up Space. But, says Kat Rosenfeld, the title of the new biography of our youngest ever Congresswoman works on multiple levels. For one thing, it's a good description of the book itself, printed on luxuriously heavy stock, so it bears the heft of a pint-sized coffee table tome. It's also a fitting description of its subject, who is so ubiquitous as to be inescapable. And yet, for all the mental and media real estate occupied by Ocasio-Cortez, says Kat Rosenfeld, she's far more famous for being who she is than for what she's accomplished. Which brings us to the double entendre. Before it became something that brave and iconic women do, taking up space was primarily the purview of useless objects. Correct. And this entire book from New York Magazine is designed as sort of a fetishist guide to AOC, according to Kat Rosenfeld. Quote, for instance, almost dead center in the book is a 2-page, full-color, high-definition spread depicting AOC's open mouth, like a Playboy centerfold for oratory fetishists. Elsewhere in the book, there's a graphic, novelized narrative about a congresswoman's visit to the detention centers at the Mexican border, in which she appears as a heroic figure surrounded by over-the-top comic book-style villainy. In one panel, a guard stands outside a pen of sleeping women and screams, "Wake up, whores," an incident I was shocked I hadn't heard about until I realized it was invented. There's a chapter devoted exclusively to her greatest Twitter dunks, each one diagrammed to illustrate the machinations of her political genius. As a political biography, it's odd, but as partisan pornography, it's undeniably fantastic. The value of the book is the mirror it holds up to a culture in which public service and celebrity have become uncomfortably intertwined. But here's the thing. The same media that has made AOC a hero means that she has moved into an uncomfortable political space in which she is guiding the priorities of her party. And she has an extreme sensitivity to slights, as Kat Rosenfeld notes. She takes shots at her other members of her party. Of course, she suggested that I was catcalling her when I suggested that I would donate a bunch of money to a charity in order to have a debate. She suggested that was catcalling. Right? All of this for AOC is about the publicity. But this is the Democratic Party. They are guided by the AOCs of the world. And it is, frankly, a mistake by them. It is leading to the polarization of society in dramatic ways, and they're going to lose. They're going to lose because of it, and they deserve to lose because of it. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date with all our future content.